When I was about 9 or 10 years old, a friend of mine came over and he brought his Super Nintendo. And he asked my mom to rent something called Super Metroid. I had no idea what to expect. The only other games I'd ever played were Super Mario World and Tetris. This was my first introduction into the Metroidvania genre. A portmanteau of two games, Metroid and Castlevania, the genre has grown and taken on many forms over the years, but the key principle behind them has always been exploration. In most Metroidvania-style games, you as the player traverse a complex environment filled with a variety of obstacles and enemies. As you progress through the game, you acquire new abilities, keys, or items that allow you to explore more of the area, overcome more obstacles, and acquire more abilities, keys, and items, and the satisfying game loop continues. I've always loved Metroidvanias, ever since I first played Super Metroid. The sense of exploration, enjoyable movement, interesting abilities, they just make my brain sparkle. A few years back, when I first got into making video games, I joined a game jam that had Metroidvania as the theme. It lasted 1 month, and for my submission, I made a game called JOMP. That's JOMP. I was exploring how simple I could make a Metroidvania, with as reduced parts as possible while still being interesting. I also wanted to avoid any kind of combat, a common feature in the genre. The game consisted of one big labyrinthine level, with a series of keys, health upgrades, enemies, friends, and power-ups that would add to the amount of times you could jump in the air. You start the game without the ability to jump at all, but shortly you'll be able to double jump, triple jump, and so on. The level is designed around how high you can jump and what keys you have. I spent a month working on this game in my free time, and this was the first time I really started to feel good about my coding abilities, since I didn't have to look up how to code the multi-jump feature. I'd learned enough about the programming language that I could just write it out, albeit not with perfect syntax, on paper with a pen. The code behind the multi-jump function was fairly simple in nature. When you press the jump button, the game checks the amount of jumps or jomps you have at your disposal and spends one of those jomps. Your jumps refresh when you touch the ground. So when you start the game, your jump count is at 0, so you can't jump at all. But once you get your first power-up, your jump count is set to 1. Then your second upgrade brings that to 2, which means after you jump once, you can jump again in midair. Nice and easy. The level I designed, like many Metroidvania-style games, is largely open to you from the very beginning, but you can only access limited portions of it at first because of your limited jump abilities. I had to repeatedly test how high a certain platform or ledge was and make sure you could only reach it when you had the necessary power-ups. I also had to make sure there was no way to trap yourself with no way out. To add a little bit of motivation to your journey, I hid 9 friends across the level to rescue. Just by touching them, they ascend to a better place. To add a little bit of negative pressure, I added some enemies to avoid. I didn't want to give the main character a weapon or really any attack abilities, but you can stun these big boys here for a few seconds just by jumping on them. And these little spiky guys don't hurt you when they run into you, so you have to avoid the tops of one kind and the sides of another. At the end of the game, you get an infinity jump, where you can jump to your heart's content, basically flying around the level. This ability also came in handy when I was testing the level design, as I could just jump as many times as I needed to and count the number. A big part of any Metroidvania is secret tunnels, so I wanted to include a few in this game. The way I did this was just by placing a background of the same color behind the level and a foreground of the same color but with half the opacity to give this behind the veil look. For the keys, I didn't want them to actually look like keys, but to match the abstract aesthetic of the game, so I made these glyph-looking things. As this was only my second game ever, the audio mixing is a little rough. I especially want to apologize for how loud the sound is when you jump on an enemy. After a month or so of work, finally the game was ready. With hours to spare before the game jam deadline was over, I did some last-minute fine-tuning and submitted it for review. I felt good. I felt like I knew what I was doing. I felt like maybe I could really be a professional game developer someday. But when one of the game jam judges was reviewing my game, they said they liked it, but they were confused, that you could just jump as many times as you wanted to right from the beginning. I immediately booted up the game to see for myself, and yes, I had left Infinity Jump programmed in right from the beginning without realizing it. This completely defeated the whole point of the game, and it was too late to change it. One of many times I've embarrassed myself, and certainly not the last. It's been years since I made JOMP, and I've learned a lot since then. There's a lot I'd like to do with this game someday. Actually, shortly after I finished JOMP, I wrote down quite a few ideas. I drew out a whole series of interconnected levels forming a cohesive world. I designed more enemies, friends, keys, etc. I think I'd also like to update the visual design, as I'm kind of moving away from pixel art. I'd like to embrace more of a slick cartoon style. I don't have an exact time when I want to start working on these improvements, but who knows? If you subscribe to the channel and join the Lance Grabowski Monthly Game Club, you might just see it sooner than you think. JOMP was the second game I ever made, and making it brought me a lot of joy. Sure, it also brought me a lot of frustration and a lot of embarrassment, but that's just how things typically work. And I don't think I'd change anything if I could do it all over again. Except, of course, for leaving Infinity Jump on when I submitted the game. I would definitely change that. You can play JOMP for free on your computer using the browser of your choice at the link in the description. Thanks for watching.